Okay, welcome my friends and fellow TDers. I don't know if you can hear that, but that is me rubbing my hands together because I'm excited to get into this. All right, so we've gone through everything that happened in between 601 and 609, right? And I've already told you what the overarching theory is, but I will reiterate it here. I believe that what happens in this arc between 601 and 609 is a mirror of what happened during the missing 17 days. Okay. And that is something I never realized before. I went through this just before Daryl Dixon season 3 started. And I believe this is the second half specifically of a mirror arc. Okay. When they are all fighting the walkers together at the end and fighting for Alexandria to kick this horde out and all of that, it is them overcoming something. And specifically because of the way fiction is written, more than likely what they're overcoming is something similar to this happened before and they failed. Okay. So now they're going to go through it again or something very similar to it, and they're going to succeed at kicking the horde out and preserving their home. Now, I do want to acknowledge that theoretically, we could take this back to the prison. You might say, well, how, maybe this is the second half of the arc starting at the prison because they lost their home at the prison and walkers did take over it. But for me, that doesn't match up very well. I mean, that probably is part of it. And every home they've lost, their original homes before they all came together, Herschel's farm, there's a lot of places that they've lost, and that would all feed into this, of course. But the details don't match up for me because, yes, the walkers did overrun the prison in the end. And of course, that had happened at previous places too, like Herschel's farm. But number one, walkers weren't the sole reason the prison was overrun. It was the governor. He was an enemy who came and bulldozed the fences. And of course, all the fighting and the gunfire drew walkers. But walkers alone were not the reason that the prison fell. In this case, it is a horde of walkers that's about to take down Alexandria, and there's not a whole lot else there. Like that is the primary reason, right? And that was not true at the prison. Um, there's also not enough of a mirror for Team Family in thinking that the prison was the first part of the arc. A true mirror would be them trying to be proactive and lead walkers away this way and failing, right? Whereas this time they're going to lead walkers away and things are going to go wrong, but in the end they're going to succeed, right? They didn't even attempt to save the prison, and the same with Herschel's farm. They just went, okay, this is happening, we have to leave. And so there's just not enough of a mirror in the details for me. Um, my next evidence comes from things that I pointed out over the course of this arc, right? Okay, so we have Rick explaining what they're going to do to the Alexandrians in the meeting, which was one of the flashbacks. And they put so much emphasis on it, like Carter saying, we just can't control that many. You can't do that. And Rick being very confident that they can. It almost feels like he's done this before, but we've literally never seen him do this in the show before, right? At the very least, he's confident that it can be done, um, even if maybe the last time he didn't, it didn't go so well, right? Um, then we have things like Michonne talking to Heath and talking about how he doesn't really know what it's like to be, on the raw outside and having to leave people behind because you have no other choice. Once again, we don't really have evidence that that has happened with Michonne. Has she left people behind? Yes, but it was usually a choice. And it was because they had died, and it was because of this, that, and the other. You know what I mean? Like there's always a reason. And so when she says, the whole thing about have you ever had so much blood all over you that, and her whole speech, and have you ever had to leave someone behind because there was no other choice? Dude, you have never gone through that. What is she talking about? Like, we haven't really seen anything that fits that scenario with her. I mean, again, possibly the prison, but they were talking about people there, not a home, not a place. They were talking about people. And we've never seen Michonne have to make a choice to leave somebody behind, unless, of course, it was during those missing 17 days, right? There's another one. Let's see. Oh, the other thing that I forgot about that Rick says is during that meeting, he says, if we do not get ahead of this horde, if we do not come for them, they are going to come for us. So again, that feels like it feels like something that he's gone through before. And yeah, I mean, in general, that's true of walkers, right? You want to, he's seen walkers and walker hordes take the place down. So something that big, they're going, oh, this is a disaster waiting to happen. So that's true. But it also feels like there's just so much emphasis on it that he might be talking about something specific. And that's what we don't really have. Okay. So I do believe that this is the second half, like I said, of a mirror arc that started during the missing 17 days. So let's talk about what we know about the missing 17 days. Um, well, first of all, if this is the overcoming of an arc that they failed the first time, I mean, you could really say that season 5 all around was just kind of an epic fail, right? I mean, they lost so many people, and everything that happened, of course, with Beth, with Bob, with Tyrese, with the terminus and the termites, and it just there was so much trauma going on there, right? So in 509 and 510, we see the group being very weighed down and very heavy and sad and exhausted. And of course, it's because of grief over the people that they've lost. But what if it's a lot more than that, too? I think there's a lot more than we realize. So let me and also consider, sorry, I keep backtracking on myself, but consider too that in 610, which comes right after 609, so right after this arc is over, the next thing that happens, it's the next world where they meet Jesus and then they start trading with Hilltop and all of that. Everybody seems a lot happier at that point. And, I'm not at all saying that Daryl's totally over his grief about Beth. We know that he was not. But at the same time, we do see him going out with Rick and they're kind of being goofy. They're doing their bro thing, and they have kind of a comedy of errors in that episode. And I mean, it's understandable. Okay, while Daryl is definitely still grieving Beth, there would be some validation in the fact that they were able to successfully come together, the whole group, and defend their home. In facing so many walkers and being able to dispense with them, it's like they did it and they know how to do it now. Um, there's the fact that Carl almost died, but he survived. And again, that really could be an equal but opposite mirror of the fact that Beth was shot in the head, and as far as they're concerned, she didn't survive. But Carl was shot in the head, and he did. So you see that it's just better than it was. They're having a few victories instead of just failure piled upon failure, which was kind of what season 5 was, unfortunately. All right, so let's talk about the missing 17 days. I'm going to go through what we know very, very quickly. It's going to sound like a lot, but it's actually less than it sounds like, and then I will show you what I'm seeing here. Let's stop here. I just pulled up a few of my old posts. We know what they showed us, which was the group running away from something toward these cars. We don't know what they're running from. We don't know when this was. Was it directly after Grady? Was it after the church? Was it right before 509? We don't know. In a way, I think this could be right before 509 when everything else from the missing 17 days has already gone down, only because these cars they're getting in are the ones they're driving in 509. It really shouldn't have taken them. So the 17 days in and of itself is a little bit problematic for me. I mean, just in terms of it being suspicious, because number one, it's weirdly specific. Nicotero is the one that gave us that and said it was on The Talking Dead after the show, and it was the Talking Dead that was after 509. And Chris, the host, specifically asked, how long has it been since Coda, since we saw Daryl carry Beth out of the hospital? And Nicotero said, 17 days. I mean, like, no hesitation. He knew exactly how long it was. That is weirdly specific. Now, what I will say is that it really should not, from what we know, it should not have taken them 17 days to take Noah home, okay? That's way too long. I mean, just the drive in our world, from Georgia up to where his home was, you could really do it in a day, maybe two. It's not that far. And of course, because this is Apocalypse World, we could be looking at roads in disrepair that they would have to go around. We could be looking at walker hordes crossing the highways that they would need to go around. So of course, it's probably going to take a little bit longer than that for them. But even so, even so, I think we would be looking at maybe 4 or 5 days total if there wasn't some massive disaster or some reason to stop. So 17 days is a long time, okay? That's more than 2 weeks. And even what we know about the missing 17 days really should not have taken that long. So anyway, I'm wondering if this is after everything, whatever it was, after everything went down and they're getting into the cars and heading north with, to take Noah home. We have this, which was always a big shot for me. It is clearly a picture of Maggie crying outside a car. And even though the car door or the car looks empty, the door is open, which to me suggests that somebody who was inside got out. So I've always believed that this was a picture of when they returned for Beth's body and she was gone. And they assumed that she had gotten out somehow. And this is Maggie crying because Beth's body is gone, right? We don't know for sure that that's what it is, but that's what it had always seems to me like it's been a representation of. Okay, so we know that filming happened at this cabin, and this is, I don't have it in this picture, I'll show you in a minute, but this is next door to another house that is the plantation style with the white columns. But filming was definitely done here during season 5 filming, and Emily was seen going in. So there was kind of a famous thing where the Spoiling Dead fans is what reported it, that someone that looked a lot like Emily, I mean, she had the blonde hair with the ponytail and was wearing the yellow polo and the jeans. A van pulled up, she jumped out, she went in the cabin. They didn't see her face, but it was clearly either Emily or a stunt double. So either way, Beth was at this location, right? And they reported it that they had seen her, and everybody was really happy about that. It hit the airwaves in a big way because the last we saw of Beth was her being taken in season 4 from Daryl, and there's a huge theory going on that she had been taken by the termites and was being cooked, like the kebabs on the grill when Maggie and Glenn got there were actually Beth, which is really really kind of a gross theory. And the thing is, the powers that be actually refuted that. They came out and said, no, that is not what's happening. And which is interesting that they did that at the time. You know, I wasn't as into it and I didn't think about it, but it's really interesting that they refuted that because usually they don't refute theories. And I think the reason they did is because it got so big, it went so viral, that theory, that they felt like they needed to come out and squash it and say, no, no, that's not where we're going. And I remember one of them, I honestly don't know which one this was, if this was Gimple or Nicotero or somebody else, but one of them said, you know, even if that's what we were thinking of doing, the fact that so many people think that, we would probably change direction because we want to do things people don't expect. Now, if you ask me, that's a load of crap right there. I mean, they wouldn't change direction after they'd already planned something, but that was his way of explaining it and saying, no, no, that's not what we're doing. But the point is, they felt really compelled to come out and squash that theory. So anyway, the point is, when Emily was seen filming, that actually made a lot of people really happy. They're like, oh, she's filming. Okay, she's okay. Daryl's going to find her. Cool, you know. But when that hit the airwaves and everyone started talking about how she'd been filming, Emily immediately tweeted something like within 5 minutes, right? Going to the movies with a friend or something. And even the Spoiling Dead fans who were not a big fan of Beth's character or of Emily, even they said that was really obvious. Like, yeah, nice try, but we just saw you going in, and it's really obvious that you're trying to misdirect so that people don't realize you're filming, but we saw you. You know, like, nice try and everything, but no, we're not fooled at all. So anyway, she was seen filming here. That is something that we know. Now, this is another picture of this, and it's in front of the house. So the one I just showed you is right here. And this car, red car, broken out windows, star, like a sheriff star as the hub. And then you can see this a little bit better. There are crosses on the windows here. There's blood on the doors. So this very much looks like a Walking Dead house that they would be filming at, right? But we have never seen this. We have never seen any scenes that had this in it, but it was filmed for season 5. And I will, once again, I will die on this hill. If they had just scrapped it and decided not to use it, they would have been talking about it by now. They would tell us what they filmed. They would show us, you know, maybe behind the scenes footage. The owner of this place and one of the owners of the dogs that was on set said that they were allowed to be there because they owned it and to take pictures, but they were told they could not post those pictures anywhere until the scenes aired. And if they had decided to scrap it, they would have given those people permission to post the pictures. But we haven't seen them yet, which means these scenes haven't aired yet, and they are still planning to air them at some point. Okay, so this red car is important because of the drawing that is in Sam's bedroom. I'm sorry this is small, but here's a close-up of it. So you see how it's the same thing. I mean, it's a child's drawing, so it's not going to be exact, but there's the cabin, there's the red car. There's actually a car on the roof over here for some reason. We're not sure what that pertains to exactly. And I think there's another car up in the clouds here. But it's just a drawing, and it looks exactly like those missing 17 days, the filming location, so that Emily was seen at. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute and what I think these pictures kind of mean, why they were put there. This is a picture of the house that's right next to it that's very plantation style. I honestly do not know who these women are. I think I saved this picture just for the house. They really could even just be fans or somebody who was in Georgia at that time and were allowed to take pictures here. And then it was posted on social media, and somehow I ended up finding it. But this is the other house, and I think the dogs were more seen around this house. And it had a sign that said "Do not mow the lawns" because it was supposed to look very Walking Dead and apocalyptic. You can see it's very like the gates all smashed here. So anyway, both of these locations were used. We did also see Stephen Yun, who played Glenn, and Alana Masterson, who played Tara, at this location at one point. We know okay, we know that Stephen Yun posted this picture. He tweeted it. This is the inside of that cabin. Okay, it's dark. You can kind of see a door right here with the light coming in from the windows. He posted it and he wrote "open the door" with all the zero or the O's in the door, "open the door," like that. And then he deleted it pretty quickly afterward. But obviously not before people got screenshots, right? So again, he was seen at that filming location and then he posted this. So clearly he was filming something there, right? And I'm going to talk about that too. Okay, we also know because of the trading cards that Daryl and the group tried to bury her at a white church. And we do have some evidence for that. Um, from the Spoiling Dead fans, we do know that there was an evening that they were trying to get spoilers, and there was a white church with a gold top here, but it was behind a wall. So the spoiler cameras really didn't catch anything of what was being filmed there or who was there or anything, but they could see the lights and they could hear it from behind the wall. This is another shot of it. You can see the church here, and they've got lights up here, which is part of the filming. That same night that they were filming that, Emily posted this. She said, "One of my monkey friends turned into a zombie." And we've got like the black and white. We've got one of them missing a leg, which could suggest a hurt leg. And then I always say the three monkeys always remind me of the "see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil," because obviously often you see monkeys representing that. Anyway, but everyone just assumed, and probably rightly so, that she was filming that night. But again, just like that cabin, we never saw anything about a church. We never saw them try to bury her. We never saw any of that. And there were people who were keeping up on these spoilers, even before Coda happened, even before they knew she was going to get shot and apparently die in season 5. And they were looking for this footage. They were going, okay, but they filmed something there. Why are we not seeing that? We never saw it. It still has not been seen, right? But we know she filmed there along with a bunch of other people. And so when the trading card came out, it made sense that they tried to bury her somewhere, and we have not seen that yet, okay? The other big thing we know is that there were 800 walkers that filmed for Coda. And this is where I had posted, this was an interview that Nicotero gave, and they asked him this, and then this is just a transcript of it. So they said, "Your team processed some 9,000 zombies in season 4. How many do you envision making up in season 5? And he said, "I don't know. I can tell you at the mid-season finale that we just finished shooting there." Okay, sorry, I'm reading that wrong. "I can tell you that in the mid-season finale, which would be Coda, that we just finished shooting, there were upwards of 800 walkers for just that episode. I haven't done the tally for the season yet, but being out in the world, it's a little trickier to avoid zombies. When you're in the prison, you have a safe haven. The zombies aren't so much of an everyday occurrence, whereas in the season, we're out in the world at some point, so they're there." So again, we just never saw that. And we did not see 800 walkers anywhere in season 5. I think other than this, the biggest place we would have seen them was during the wolf trap. And even then, I think there was 100, maybe 200. I mean, it was not 800, right? It was a lot smaller than that. So, I mean, Nicotero inadvertently gave us this. I don't know if he meant to or if that was a talking point he was given, but we know that there were walkers. And this is yet another reason that I think we can draw a parallel between whatever happened during the missing 17 days and the season 6 arc, right? Is because we're talking about a horde of walkers. Now, I do think that there were probably were meant to be more in season 6 than 800. I think that's meant to be several thousand. But you get the idea. There was a lot of walkers to deal with, and that's part of the footage they did not show us that we have not seen yet. We have not seen the 800 walkers. The only other thing I will mention is that the spoiler site did mention a car chase. They didn't really get any pictures of it, so without going back and digging through the spoiler post, there's no way for me to know where it was or anything, but they did say that there was a car chase right around Terminus, and it involved a lot of the key players like Rick and Glenn and Michonne and Maggie, right? We don't know what that was either. And just because it was filmed around Terminus doesn't necessarily mean it had anything to do with Terminus. I mean, it might have in the show, but they might have just been using that location and it's a different location in the show. But either way, we didn't see a car chase. So that's another thing that we're missing, and we have no idea what that was, okay? So That's, I think, the gist of what we know about the missing season 5 days, okay? Um, it sounds like a lot, but again, 17 days is a lot of time. So even if we factor in the fact that they tried to bury her at the church, so what we usually say, this is what TD has come up with by putting that all together. We think that they took her body to some church, they were going to do some sort of burial. We can also reach back to what happened to Father Gabriel's church as a foreshadow of this. A walker horde came through and they had to get out of its way because it was a big horde and they were like, okay, we got to run. But she was literally dead weight, which was the name of one of the episodes at the back half of season 4. And so they decided to leave her in a car somewhere so that they could get away from the horde. And then once it moved through, they would go back and get her and finish the burial. But when they returned for her, she was not there, right? And we even believe that maybe they looked for her, Daryl would have looked for her, but they never found her. And that's why we have him and Aaron seeing that walker on the tree, the blonde walker that clearly reminded Daryl of Beth in some way. Um, because he thinks she's a walker out there somewhere, right? That he was never able to put her to rest. So, I mean, as I was saying, even if we factor in the burial at the church, I still don't think that would have taken a lot of time, maybe an extra day. And then they had to run from the walker horde and then they would have had to go back. So, I mean, plausibly, the reason that maybe it would have taken so long, the whole 17 days, could have been the search, right? If they were looking for her and they kept looking for like a week or more. And then finally, Rick said, nope, we're leaving, you know? So that could be. But again, we just don't have enough events other than the search to really feel those missing 17 days. But here's the thing. um, the other evidence we have is Maggie finding the walker in the trunk, which clearly, you know, freaked her out. But the other thing that I like to point out that most people don't really, it doesn't jump out at them, so they don't pay attention to it. At one point during them, 510 them, it's, you know, the same. In fact, it's probably that same time when Maggie found the walker in the trunk. They come up, like the whole group is walking, I think more through the woods, maybe on the road, but they come up on a traffic snarl, right? So it's a whole bunch of cars on the road, and all of them stop and stare at it. I mean, even Rick, even Carl, they all looked really freaked out by that. And they didn't say anything, like they didn't draw attention to it, but they all stop and like freeze in their tracks. And Daryl takes off. He's like, I'm going to look for water by, and he runs off into the woods. Now they all move forward, and even though they're being a little bit weird, they still go through the cars looking for, you know, supplies or anything they can use. And that's when Maggie finds the walker in the trunk. So something about that traffic snarl really freaked them out and reminded them of something horrible that happened during the missing 17 days. And we don't know what it was. And the fact that Maggie finds Beth in the, or not Beth, the Beth-like walker in the trunk is, again, it's them showing us something about Beth, something about this happened during the missing 17 days, and they're all still recovering from it. This is still them being really deep in their trauma about it, right? And we don't know what that is. We have no idea. They have not told us. Then there's the fact that Daryl was kind of pissy with everyone during 5B, especially with Rick. He seemed like he was mad at Rick. And we've always thought this was just because Rick put his foot down and made Daryl stop searching for Beth. And while Daryl would understand the logic of doing that, he was still kind of pissed at Rick for it, you know, so he's just kind of really surly with Rick in the first few episodes of 5B, but he does get over it, and it's not really anything they ever talk about. Um, so we have even toyed with the idea of someone like perhaps the CRM or even the Grady Bunch controlling those 800 walkers and like sort of sicking them on Team Family. But of course, we can't know that for sure. We don't know. We haven't even seen the horde, so we don't know. Um, like I say, personally, after doing this analysis, I think it was a lot more complicated than that, or a lot more complicated than what TD has put together so far. So all of this evidence, you know, kind of leads us to believe that something bigger went down, but we don't know what it is. And after doing this analysis of season 6, I really do think that they tried something about those 800 walkers. They tried to lead that horde away. They tried to manipulate its direction in some capacity, and it didn't work. And that, I think, is what led to them losing Beth in some way. I don't know what the details are. I still don't, but I'm going to show you everything that I found and why I think that. Okay, so first is the whole Quint gate or gate 5 that it shows at the beginning of Operation Lead the Walkers Away. And I really did already cover this in one of the previous videos. It just seems to me that they are telling us that this sequence is what happened in season 5. Um, and probably the stuff that we didn't see, right? That's the way that they are symbolizing it. Okay, so I made you this little graphic, or rather, me and my buddy Canva made it for you because um, the extent of my visual art skills are like stick figures. But anyway, it really kind of helped me to visualize things, and I think it will help you to visualize kind of what I'm seeing. So first of all, it's nice to get a bird's eye view of it. So we have the rock quarry over here, and when the walkers first break out, they're heading directly toward Alexandria over here, right? But that's what they don't want to happen. They don't want them heading there. So we see the balloon stations. This is where it kind of starts, and then we have this turn. So this is Marshall Road. They would have continued straight on Marshall, but they turned them onto Reading. And this is where, see, the RV is here, yellow station. Eventually they'll hit the green station. We've got Sasha and Abraham down here in the red car, Daryl on his bike leading them away. Now, in terms of the groups, well, first of all, we have the tractor store, which Glenn and Heath and Nicholas go to take care of the walkers. And that's because they're afraid that the noise of the walkers banging on the inside of the tractor store will pull the walkers off the road, and they don't want that. And they successfully do take care of that. Now, we are not actually told where the tractor store is. I don't know if it's back here or if it's more like out here. It doesn't really matter. We just know that Glenn went there because they knew they would be going by and took care of it, and then he went back to where Rick was. But I want you to notice that the tractor store thing, it's kind of a side mission and it's a little bit superfluous. It was just like something extra for Glenn to do because nothing about it leads to his death fake out, right? He does go, he does take care of it with Heath and Nicholas, and then they go back to where Michonne and Rick are, but it's after that, after the horn goes off and the herd gets pulled off the road, that the death fake out happens. So they could have just had him stay with Glenn and, or with, excuse me, Rick and Michonne the whole time, and the result would have been the same. This whole go to the tractor store and handle this is extra, okay? And if that had not happened, it wouldn't have been a big deal. Like it wouldn't have taken anything else away from the plot. So I want you to notice that. I do think I know why they did it, but I just want you to notice that for now, okay? So they do the turn and it works and everyone's heading this way. And I want you to notice that like when the walkers come off the road, they're going to come off here, the back half of them. And again, I'm not sure that this is where the tractor store was. It might be out here, so I don't think it, you know, we don't really see the tractor store again. But the town where the pet shop is in is somewhere here. So these are all woods, right? And then heading toward Alexandria. So hold on. Okay, so what's going to happen is that the horn over here goes off when the wolves get there, and the back half of the herd starts heading toward Alexandria. They get pulled off the road, right? So, I mean, at this point, you know, we've got Michonne, Glenn, Heath, David, their whole group is heading this way. And it's actually because they're in front of the walker horde. You know, they're over here on this side of the road. And so when the walkers move off the road, they have to run because the walkers are coming up behind them. And then they end up in this little town, you know, and then eventually end up back at Alexandria. But the horde catches up to them in the town and they have to run again. And that's when Annie dies and that's when Scott gets hurt. At some point, they go over the fence and David dies. He had already been bitten. All of that, right, that I showed you. Meanwhile, Rick, he was here with them. He goes behind the horde, back up this way, gets the RV, and I'm assuming he takes it around this way, and he tries to get in front of the horde. Now, there's all kinds of roads and woods and houses and all kinds of things over here. So he comes on one of the roads, and he's waiting in the RV for the horde to catch up to him, and he's planning to take it this way and lead them away again from Alexandria. But of course, that doesn't work. Meanwhile, when Daryl is looking for him, Daryl is driving all over these roads looking for him, and he just doesn't know exactly where Rick is. And then we have in the pet shop town is where Glenn and Nicholas try to light up the feed store, but that doesn't work. And so the death fake out happens, right? But the main thing I want you guys to get from this, other than being able to visualize it, is the fact that while most of Team Family and the stronger people that we know were over here dealing with Operation Lead the Walkers Away, there were very few of them in Alexandria. The only people that were really there who are characters we know that have names and that we care about are Carol, Carl, baby Judith, Enid, Jesse and her two sons, and, you know, Olivia was there. But that's it. I mean, Carter was out doing this. I believe Aaron was out doing this with them. Tobin was, you know, most of the main characters. So it's just important as I go into this that you understand there was a secondary group that attacked these people at the same time that Operation Lead the Walkers Away was going on. Okay, I just want you to understand that. I know you know that, it's obvious, but just I want you to really have a concept of that because it's important. Okay. Um, and I have to wonder, we're kind of neither here nor there on this, but I do have to wonder if how planned the wolves' attack at this exact moment was. Um, because you could say it was just bad luck, really, all the way around. It was bad luck. It was bad luck that the semi truck fell when it did because they weren't planning to do this until the next day, and then they had to do it now that day because the truck fell, and here come the walkers, right? So that was bad luck, and then it was bad luck that this just happened to be the day that the wolves attacked. We had seen them before; they had set them up. Morgan had seen them, and then there was the wolf trap that Daryl and Aaron got caught in at the end of season 5. So we knew they were around. But what are the chances they attack in this exact moment, right? Now, I think that on the one hand, I don't think it was totally coincidental, but I also don't want to give them too much um, credit because they were a very disorganized group. They didn't seem like the kind of group like the CRM that was full of planning and logic and strategy. I think they were way more disorganized than that. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't at least some planning that went in, because if the wolves came and even for 5 minutes got together and were trying to strategize how to, go and attack Alexandria, and they realized that most of the fighters were not there, then I 100% think they could have taken advantage of that and said, okay, let's do this now because most of their men and their men and their women, the people who know how to fight, are not there right now. So it would have been an easy way to attack. But I do wonder if, they could have orchestrated it in some way. Did they go push the semi truck off the ledge in the quarry? Did they do that not knowing exactly when it would be that it would fall, but knowing that this would help them out in some way? You know what I mean? Like I said, I'm kind of 50-50 on it. It might not have been anything like that because this was a very disorganized group, but we also don't know. It could have been. Maybe at some point we'll find out that there was more strategy than what we saw. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is because what this parallels in the missing 17 days, I think that there could have been more strategy during the missing 17 days, which makes me think there could have been some here too. But I can also see that maybe they just didn't worry too much about the strategy here and it really was just chance because this is just a parallel and it's not going to be 100%. Anyway, just something to think about, okay? So now with all of that said, let's get into this a little bit. Okay, so let's start with the whole hard right-hand turn because I think that this is really important. One way to think about this is that, I've talked plenty about how red equals death and green equals resurrection, so they kind of go together. And then we have the yellow. And what we know about the yellow is that it means escape. We've always thought it meant escape from death in some way. Beth was wearing it in Coda, so assuming that we're right, then she escaped death there. But we also have other examples of it, not just that one, that have been confirmed, like in 7/12 when we had Rick's like very micro death fake out. He fell from the carnival ride, and Michonne thought he was being eaten by walkers. And then when he came out and showed that he was alive, he came out of a yellow ride car, that was the exact same color as Beth's polo that she wore in Coda. So I think it represents not only escape from death, but it represents the path by which they escape. We've also seen things like during the Reaper's arc, where there was a green house versus a yellow house, and they were looking for Maggie. Let's see, I'm probably gonna screw it up. They were either looking for her in the yellow house and she was actually in the green house, or vice versa. So there's also a theme there of looking for someone in the wrong place, which is very much a Beth thing. If I remember, I will try to go over that. And let me just say that, you guys, if I say I'm gonna come back to something and I don't, send me and ask her something and let me know, because a lot of times I just forget to circle back around to everything I'm talking about. So sometimes I leave you hanging and I don't mean to do that. I just don't realize I didn't circle back around. So if there's something I don't answer, then let me know. Anyway, so I think that the turn here, it represents the turn in the narrative and also when the two different routes schismed. So what I mean is, for a long time, we've had this A/B theory. There's like the A route versus the B route. And the best we can really say is that Beth is taking a different route, right? She went someplace else. She's not with Team Family, hasn't been since Coda, right? So she's on a different path. And we've had lots of theories about that. We see a lot of A versus B kind of stuff. And I think it has to do with a lot of times very general themes about which path you choose and which choice you make and the results of that and all of that. But we do see it around Beth a lot, or at least tangled up with Beth symbolism. So, I mean, even if you look at like literally in the plot, if you see yellow, like imagine for a minute that this yellow station with the yellow balloons represents Coda because Beth was wearing yellow in Coda. We did have a big schism there, even in terms of location. The group left Georgia after that. So where you could say this was them going, bopping along from the beginning of the series, and then all of a sudden they're just not in Georgia anymore. They make a hard right turn and they're going someplace else, and they take a different path than they were originally on, right? Um, so I think that that's a lot what this represents, but I was saying before that even like spiritually, I think the red, yellow, and green represent something about where they are, like psychologically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, however you want to say it. Red is indicative of death, but it also is indicative of just like the less desirable place to be psychologically, right? So it's when they're in their trauma. It's when they are feeling really terrible, when they're grieving, when they're angry. And the reason that I am thinking that is that not only do we see a lot of representations of red being death, and of course, red is the color of blood, so that makes sense. But there are times when specifically Rick and Morgan talk about seeing red, right? And this is when they are angry, when they're dealing with really extreme PTSD, and when they're lashing out and being very, very brutal. And it's just because of that trauma that is unhealed, and they're kind of in the thick of it. So I think that's what the red represents. And then the green obviously would represent life. It represents hope. It represents reunion. Glenn used the green balloons to show that he was alive. Like that's very on the nose. So then what does yellow represent in that case? I think it's the transition between. It's the path they take to get from one to the other, right? And it tends to be a really difficult time. It tends to be a time when they're going through a lot of stuff and having just a lot of difficulties, right? But the turn is important here, and I think that this represents a turn in the narrative. Okay, so that's the first thing. Okay, so let's talk about this other group then. And one thing that was a big deal for me that I mentioned before in the previous video was Jesse killing that female wolf in the kitchen with the scissors. That really jumped out at me once I started seeing this and it started coming together. And here's why. It's clearly meant to be a parallel of Beth stabbing Dawn. Okay, we can't really get away from that. Blonde stabbing a dark-haired woman with scissors, right? Exactly what happened to Grady. Even though Beth stabbing did not kill Dawn, Daryl did that. It did, I guess you could say it led to Dawn's death, just not directly. Anyway, so here's the thing. If this is a parallel to what happened during the missing 17 days, then I want you to notice that we have, like I said, Team Family doing, most of them doing Operation Lead the Walkers Away, and only a few who aren't. And those few who aren't are attacked by a secondary group. And of that group, Jesse, who in that case represents Beth, stabs one of them with the scissors. So that kind of suggests then, by if you follow that to conclusion, that the wolves might represent Grady, because Jesse stabs one of the wolves with scissors. Dawn was stabbed by Beth with the scissors, right? So in the template, in the parallel, the wolves represent either Grady or possibly another group that is tangled up with Grady, which we have said might be the CRM, right? That's interesting. It sort of suggests that maybe if something like Operation Lead the Walkers Away was happening during the missing 17 days, that the Gradians might have attacked the other members of Team Family. Now, who would that be? I was thinking about it and I was like, okay, but who would they have been attacking? Well, it would probably be the people who were injured. So I'm going to come back to, why they might have been leading walkers away in just a minute, but assuming that they were, just assume that they were for a minute, who would not have been participating? The ones who were injured. So there was Carol. When she came out of Grady, she was still hurt pretty bad. Tyrese was helping her because she couldn't hardly walk. So Carol, remember that Eugene was hurt because Abraham punched him in the face. Then, of course, there's baby Judith. Probably Carl wouldn't have. I mean, he certainly could have in terms of he was healthy and fine. But back then, he was also taking care of Judith a lot. So, you can see Rick saying, you stay here and take care of Judith, just like they did at the church, Father Gabriel's church. I also think maybe, possibly, Tyrese would not have taken part. Not again because he couldn't, but maybe because he was also, they made a big deal in 5A about Rick thanking him for taking care of Judith and him saying, I'm always here for anything she needs, I will protect her. So I can see them, maybe leaving one person with the group, especially because they are all injured, that you would need someone just in case anything went wrong, so maybe Tyrese and um, Carl would have stayed behind. So there would have been probably a group of them that were not involved, and this suggests that maybe they were attacked by a secondary group. Um, so there's that. And having, I said before, just having Jesse be blonde and saying, oh, then we'll throw some scissors in there and do a Beth. I mean, just to put that in there for no other reason than to stick it in there is just not the way Gimbal does things. It has to be part of something bigger. It has to be part of a template. And I think that the reason that they put that in there was to show a link between the wolves and the Gradients, the Grady Bunch. Okay. Um, the next thing that I talked about that is a big deal is that when Rick is in the RV and he's talking on the radio to whoever can hear him, and he's talking about not running back to Alexandria, even though there's gunfire going on there, he says, this is for them. If we were running back there, that would be for us, meaning it would be reactive. It's because we're scared and we don't know what's going on. We have to trust that they can handle what's going on there. And it's for them that we're doing this to lead the walkers away so that they remain safe, right? But when he says that, when he says this is for them, when this first aired, that jumped out at me because the way he says it, I mean, it's Rick that says it both times, so of course it's in his voice both times, but the way he says it, the emphasis he puts on the specific words is exactly what he said about Beth in 509 when it came to taking Noah home. He was explaining and he said, Beth wanted to get him there, and if we do this, it would be for her. It's like their way of honoring her last wishes is to take Noah home. Um, and he said it exactly the same way. And I was going, I know he's not talking about Beth here, but I feel like that's a Beth reference because that's exactly what he said about Beth. Like there has to be, even if it's not what I'm thinking or it's not an exact Beth reference, there has to be a correlation there. They don't repeat dialogue unless they're doing it on purpose, right? Um, so there's a few different ways that I think that we could go about this. Uh, in the missing 17 days, it's hard to know exactly how to interpret this because we don't know what happened and we don't know what order it happened in. So actually, let me come back to that. Let's talk about them leading the walkers away. Why would they have been leading walkers away during the missing 17 days? The blanket answer is I don't know. But that's a lot of walkers. Nicotero told us there were 800 walkers. That's a lot. So I'm wondering if those walkers were coming toward them rather than just have the walkers suddenly show up and them go, oh, shit, run. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe they saw them coming and tried to lead them away to a different path so that they could bury Beth, or maybe, I've even considered that maybe there was a whole other group that we don't know of and, who was living somewhere outside of Atlanta and asked for their help and said, look, we've got these walkers coming toward us. Can you help us do this? That seems maybe a little bit less likely because we didn't see anything like that. We don't have a whole lot of hints of it. But what I'm really looking at here is the fact that in this case, in season 6, the walkers were heading straight toward Alexandria, which was their home. And in season 5, Team Family didn't have a home. So it's got to be something that parallels this, but it's not going to be exact. It's not going to be a home that they were trying to put down roots with. And I don't know, maybe it was. Maybe they found a place and said, okay, maybe this is a good place for us to settle and we could be here. But then they saw these walkers coming and we're like, okay, let's try to get, I don't know. There's so many different possibilities. But I do think that at some point they were, like I've already said, they were attempting to manipulate the movements of this walker horde, the 800 that Nicotero mentioned. And they were just, it was an epic fail. Like they were not successful. But that is why when they see this horde at Alexandria, whatever happened, they at least know that it's possible, even if it got kind of screwed up in season 5 and it didn't work. They learned enough to know that this can be done. And they didn't want to lose Alexandria to a horde and have to run again. So they said, we are going to fight for this place to live. And they did. I think the fact that they failed 3 times, I keep saying that, right? First, there was the back half being pulled off by the horn. And then there was Rick trying to do the RV, and then there was Glenn trying to do the feed shop. I mean, those may all correlate to stuff that happened during the missing 17 days. But again, I can't go into more detail about that because we don't know what happened. But I think the structure is probably very specific because it mirrors what happened during the missing 17 days. So the other thing I thought about is that when he says them, this is for them, like I said, he said that specifically about Beth before. So could Alexandria and the people who are there in this case, could they represent Beth in the missing 17 days? Maybe. It depends on when the burial or the attempted burial took place. So what I'm thinking is that it's possible that all of this with the walkers and everything happened before they attempted to bury her. Or maybe they started the burial but didn't finish it. Again, we don't know. Like any number of things, we don't know. But maybe they still had her body and she was with those like Carol and Carl and Eugene who were injured, and then they got attacked, and that's when they took Beth's body. The only thing is that that kind of doesn't take into account the car, which has to fit in somehow. Anyway, I'm just spitballing here for different possibilities, but because he said this is for them, I felt like that symbolically represented Beth from before. But I don't know exactly how that would work, right? So um, the point is, what I'm seeing is that during the missing 17 days, a large part of Team Family were trying to lead walkers away. Some other group attacked the people who were not participating in that, and something about that led to Beth's body disappearing. I'm sure the car was still in there somewhere. I'm still her being surrounded by the walker horde is still in there. Maybe because they got attacked by this other group, that's when they had to leave her body to, protect themselves and try to run. And again, notice that even though they were trying to keep the walker horde away from Alexandria, a big chunk of it, half of it, still ended up around Alexandria, and they had to fight it off, right? So at some point, they left Beth, and the walker horde surrounded her, and all of that, and she was left behind. And then, I mean, I've even thought that maybe it could be kind of the opposite of what I'm saying structurally, in that maybe it was them doing the burial, having to leave her because the Walker Horde came, which is what we've always said. Maybe the Walker Horde just stopped. I mean, they usually keep going, but they can also stop and become dormant and just chill. And so what if they couldn't get back to Beth's body because the Walker Horde was there? So they had to come up with some reason, some way to lead these walkers away so that they could get her body, right? And so that's what they did. They tried to lead them away, and maybe disaster struck and it just did not go well. But then they came back and her body was gone, right? So it's any number of things that could be possible. But what this does suggest is that either Grady or another group, bigger group that is associated with them, was involved in some way in how Beth's body disappeared. And that is why I talked about, whether the wolves had planned this or not. If it was Grady and if it was the CRM, I think that they would have done a great deal of planning and it would have been very strategic. But I can also see that, maybe for this season 6 mirror, they just didn't worry about that because they wanted to use the wolves who were much more disorganized. So either way with that, but it did make me wonder, was there more to the wolves and their planning than we saw? I don't know. So let's talk about a couple of other things here. I said about the tractor store and how it was superfluous, but remember that we have that picture that Stephen Yun posted from inside the cabin, and it said, "Open the door." Okay, hold on, I'm going to show you something. So this did seem very superfluous for Glenn, but remember that this is where they do the countdown. They say 1, 2, 3, and what are they doing? They're opening a door. There's no way that is a coincidence. Okay. He said, open the door in his post that was coming from that location, that cabin, right? So I don't know what open the door means. Maybe it was something similar where it was part of Operation Lead the Walkers Away from, what they were doing in the missing 17 days. And he had to go to that cabin and there were walkers inside, or he was trying to lead walkers inside, or there were walkers outside and he had to open the door and fight through them or something. Okay. But there's the fact that they're actually literally opening a door here, and that we know that Stephen Yun was filming at that other location. Those two things are correlated. So while this may be a little bit extra in this particular arc in season 6, the reason they're including it is because it's a mirror to what happened in season 5. And Glenn went on some side mission, probably with Tara, because Alana was seen there. And of course, they didn't know Nicholas or Heath yet. They went on some side mission that had to do with what was going on in the missing 17 days. And this is a mirror to that. Okay, so those two things line up. I did want to say a word about Enid's parents and the turn signals. So Like I said, I didn't go too much into Enid other than saying that the red coat thing was a Beth parallel, but there is one part that we have looked at before. It's this part right here in the beginning when you can't really see her parents because they're in the car that she's standing in, but they're talking and they're trying to get the car started. And it's having an electrical problem, which I've always seen as kind of like the RV having an electrical problem, kind of the battery theory. It just won't start, right? Um, but they specifically said that the turn signal wasn't working, the blinkers aren't working. And then one of them says, well, we can learn with it, or we can live without turn signals. And we didn't really know what that meant, right? But it seems too specific. Like we hear this line of dialogue very, very clearly. And remember what I said about the big turn, right? So I want to bring it back to that hard right turn that they made with the walkers, or that they kind of forced the walkers to take. If we think of it in this way, in the narrative, that Team Family went one direction while Beth stayed there on the same path because she was in a car, then she was the allegorical RV, right? She didn't turn. Like the rest of the group turned, but she didn't. And this person literally says, we can live without turning. I mean, without turn signals, but that's what she's saying. It's very similar to that. It's almost a way of saying that she lived, but she didn't turn. We can live without turning. We can live without turn signals. So you could relate that to the walkers. And Beth didn't turn into a walker. She lived because she lived without turning. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. So now we need to kind of talk about, well, we need to talk about Rick in the RV, but first let's go back to Morgan because this also has to do with the wolves and the decisions that he made. So as I said, he let five of the wolves leave Alexandria and didn't kill them. And then they end up attacking Rick, and they are the ones that shoot up the RV. So on the one hand, I think it goes to what we don't understand about what happened in season 5 at Grady, because there are people that they let live. We always talk about how if Rick had not killed Lamson, they would have had 3 people rather than 2 to trade for Beth and Carol. And it was the even trade because it was like Dawn was losing 2 people and only getting back 2 cops, but then she went and said, yeah, but I'm losing Noah too. So if they had had a third person, Lamson, to trade for her, she would not have had any ground to stand on to make Noah come back, and then Beth might not have been shot. Okay. So that's one way in which if they had let somebody live rather than killing them, it would have changed things here, right? But here we have Morgan letting these people live, and then Rick almost dies, and the RV gets shot up, right? But we could also see it as, a lot of people in Team Delusional have talked about how they do let the Gradients live in general. It's very rare that Team Family walks away from a civilization without completely bulldozing it, right? And, either because it gets bulldozed by walkers or by one of their enemies, or because, like Terminus, it was a bad place and so they take it down, right? But they left Grady standing. And so you have to wonder if this correlated to something that happened in the missing 17 days. Because they left the Gradients alive, did some of them circle around, somehow attack Team Family, somehow send the Horde after them, somehow take Beth's body? I mean, I feel like there's a correlation here, right? And it's really hard to know for sure because, again, because we don't know what happened. We don't know what order it happened in. We don't know the chronology. It's really hard to figure out. So here's the other thing is, let's talk about Rick for a minute. The fact that Rick goes back, let me get back to my, hold on. So the fact that when the walkers get pulled off the road by the horn, he goes back, gets the RV, and I'm assuming he kind of comes around here and then into, here somewhere. And the idea is that he's trying to get ahead of the horde and get them to follow him, and then he'll bring them this way again on one of these back roads, right? And this is over here is just full of woods and roads, and this is where Daryl's driving around, but he doesn't know where Rick is. He's just driving around looking for him because there's tons of roads and tons of houses and tons of woods, right? So it's important that Rick goes back and gets the RV, which is right at the turn, right at the yellow, and takes that. And then I talked about how he becomes something of a Beth proxy because he's suddenly in a vehicle surrounded by a horde of walkers and has to get out and run. He's isolated. So I think this represents a couple of things. One of them is just it's foreshadowing for Rick himself because at some point he separates from the rest of Team Family when Jadis takes him into the CRM. And this does represent that for him. And it's a foreshadow where he comes back to this point and is taken away, taken onto a different path than everyone else. And it's important that they weren't sure if he was alive. Now, there's not a whole lot of emphasis on that in season 6. Um, Daryl was definitely afraid when he heard the gunshots that Rick was getting killed. But I don't know that Michonne had much time to be worried about it. Certainly, they weren't talking to him. He wasn't talking to them on the radio, but he comes back so quickly, like within a few hours, they see him running from the horde and opening the gate for him, that there's not a huge emphasis on it. But theoretically, because nobody could raise him on the radio and the car wasn't starting and they kind of lost track of him, they might have been worried about his safety and him being alive. So you can see how that could be something of a foreshadow, a minor one, of him disappearing and going into the CRM. And you can see it too as here he was surrounded by walkers. That's what happened in season 9. He was on the bridge. He was surrounded by walkers. He went into the water with them. And he managed to crawl out at some point. And then Jadis took him into the CRM. But the other thing that I think it represents, as I've said, is that he is also a Beth proxy because he comes back to this point where the turn is and takes the opposite path. So it's interesting. There's a lot of symbolism to go into this, you guys, because this is Marshall, right? Marshall Road versus Reading. Remember that Reading equals death, and it equals Team Family being in a kind of in the throes of their PTSD and their trauma and trying to get over that. And that is what we see after Coda. They take this turn, they go somewhere else, but they're really all dealing with a lot of issues. Here, Marshall is another name for sheriff, right? It's a synonym for it. Rick took this path, and Beth, who he called the new sheriff in town, also took this path, but they're the only ones that did. So it's like this is the path that the two of them take, who are both sheriffs. And this is another reason that I think there's still a very good chance that Beth ended up inside the CRM or some faction of it or something to do with it, because in terms of this being a foreshadow for Rick, he took this path separate from Team Family. Just like Beth, he disappeared. His body disappeared. They couldn't find it, which is exactly like Beth. And he was in the CRM, which suggests that that's where Beth ended up too, right? And we have plenty of other evidence of that, but this is just one in particular, right? I also think the fact that Rick was on this path for a little while and then went back is important because, again, after Coda, he was with Team Family until season 9. He was with them for a while. And then it's like symbolically he went back and took this path, which was just him going into the CRM. And I even have to wonder if maybe something about this path, like where they were in Georgia, maybe all of them were on a track to end up in the CRM, but because Team Family left, they sort of got away and they didn't even realize what they were getting away from. But this is what the hard turn is about. They actually moved away from that and got away from it. But Rick eventually ended up there, right? And we think that's where Beth ended up. So there's a lot of symbolism that goes into this. The fact that the RV was shot up with, bullets kept it from waking up again. The fact that he was surrounded by walkers. The fact that he was in a car. The fact that he had to jump out and run away. I think the fact that Daryl was looking for him. I mean, of course, it was a foreshadow of Daryl looking for Rick and, after season 9, which we did see. But it's also a callback and a mirror to Daryl looking for Beth, for her body, right? So the other thing is, and this is very minor, but one thing that we have always wondered about is the fact that in 509, when they're taking Noah home, not the entire group is there, right? We just kind of wondered, why didn't Daryl go? Why didn't Sasha go? Why didn't Carol go? I mean, you would think with Tyrese going, she would want to. And yeah, people have said, well, she was still hurt after Grady, and that's true. But it's now been 17 days, and I think she would mostly be well unless she was hurt again in some way. But I was thinking that if the groups split up in some way, and it may even be that they were not able to come back together right away. Like maybe because there was Operation Lead the Walkers Away, and then another small group got attacked either by the Grady Bunch or some other part of the CRM. Maybe they had to travel north for a while in different groups, and what I'm thinking about there is episode 511, which is The Distance, where Aaron is taking them back to Alexandria, and they're going in different cars, and they end up on different highways. And, a bunch of them lose their cars, and then they have to all go to the water tower, and that's where they reunite, but they got there separately because something happened. and they got separated and it was walkers. So that also could be a callback to what happened during the missing 17 days. And that would explain why not all of them went to drop Noah off. You know, they were obviously in communication via walkie-talkie, but maybe really they did get separated and didn't all come back together right away or something, you know, just something I was thinking about. Okay, so then I think the other major thing that I have is the mystery of the feed store already being burned. And there's a few different ways that I think we could interpret it, but again, because we don't know what happened, we're really just taking shots in the dark. On the one hand, I think it could represent, as I hinted at before, that what was burned is now causing you trouble. So in this case, because the feed store was already burned, they couldn't use it to lead the walkers, you know, toward them rather than toward Alexandria. And you could say that if it is true that Beth and Daryl burning the Moonshine Shack got somebody's attention, that may have caused a lot of the problems that they had. Maybe that is why she was taken to Grady, you know, that sort of thing. And then it just led to everything else. So that's one way you could look at it. But I feel like, personally, I feel like it's more than that. I feel like there's more that they're trying to tell us here that I'm not quite nailing down yet. Um, During the missing 17 days, did they try to use something? Like I said, that they failed 3 times, and I think that will be mirrored in some way. So was there something they tried to burn and it didn't work? I even considered maybe did they go back to the Moonshine Shack in some way, and it of course had burned down. And maybe this literally represents the Moonshine Shack. I don't know. I don't know. That may be a little bit reaching, but there's something about this and the fact that it was already burned and therefore it screwed up their plan. And this having the moon or having the feed store already be burned and them not being able to do what they wanted to do leads directly to Glenn's death fake out. So I feel like something happened. This is a mirror of something in the missing 17 days that led directly to them losing Beth's body. And I don't know what it was. We don't know what it was. They haven't given us enough there yet. Let me look through my notes here. Oh, and then there's the comment about the smoke that goes with it. So again, this is really the second time that they've called a lot of attention to the smoke. The first time was in season 4, and it actually wasn't Beth and Daryl. It was Carol and the girls, but they were looking at the smoke from the Moonshine Shack, right? And so they kept having these conversations about how if the smoke is black, then the fire's still burning. If the smoke is white, then it's gone out, right? So we know it went out because there was a point when the smoke was white. And you know, at the time, it seemed like it was just a way for the writers to show that they're all still in proximity to each other. You know, there's no way for Carol to know that that fire was set by Beth and Daryl, but they're close enough to them. I mean, it was a little bit on the horizon, so they weren't super close, but not like half a mile or anything, but close enough that they could see the smoke, so they were still in the same area. And so it just seemed like a cool way to show them, you know, like entangling the stories and that they're all still in the same area, they're just missing each other. But I think it was more than that. It was talking about a smoke signal, sending a signal. And at the time, it wasn't really, that's about the only thing they said about it is if, you know, whether the fire is out or not. But here, the smoke was supposed to be a signal that Glenn was alive, that he had managed to set the fire and lead the walkers toward him, and they didn't see it. So the absence of smoke was actually something that represented death, or at least they were worried that he was dead. And then, of course, he had this fake out, right? So it seemed like they really tried hard to make it seem like he was dead because they showed the bit where he fell off the dumpster and it looked like he was being eaten. And then right after that, we see Michonne looking for the smoke and it's not there. And so it's like this foreboding, he's dead, he's gone, it didn't work, you know. But that was a fake out and he did turn out to be alive later. So you can kind of see how I can see this being, I mean, Glenn's death fake out is for sure the mirror to Beth's death fake out, right? And maybe something about, I mean, the smoke might not even represent smoke in the missing 17 days. Maybe it represents something else. But it's some sort of signal that showed that she was not alive or that, you know, that something had happened or maybe that someone else was not alive. But in the end, it is a fake out and she will be shown to be alive at some point. Now, of course, I don't know. We've always said that they skipped over the missing 17 days so that we wouldn't be suspicious. And I was going to say, obviously, she wouldn't have been shown to be alive then because we haven't seen her yet. But the point is, maybe she was. Maybe that's the point. If they had shown us everything of the missing 17 days, we would have seen all of this. We would have seen them trying to lead the walkers away. We would have seen that some other group, maybe the Grady Bunch, attacked the ones who weren't participating, and maybe we would have seen someone else take her body, maybe to one of these cabins that she was filming at, to show that she was alive and being taken somewhere. And obviously, they weren't going to show us all that, so they just skipped over the whole thing, right? This is the DCL coda. That's why they called the episode coda. It was like you hit the coda and you skip. And so we missed that whole middle section. And when it comes back, it's been 17 days. There were 800 walkers we didn't see. And then we go into this arc of season 6 and leading the walkers away, and how much Beth dialogue, Beth symbolism. There's a death fake out. Glenn has Beth's lines. We have Jesse killing a wolf in the kitchen with a pair of scissors. You see what I mean? When you look at it all together, it has to be a mirror. There's no way it's not, right? We've even seen, and I could go over some of the smaller things. I don't think I'm going to because I know that we are already running really long on this, but at the very beginning, we saw reunions, which could be the reunions at Terminus, just before we go into this. We have them defining, in a way, in a very roundabout way, what I get it means. We have Enid as the Beth proxy. We have Sasha and Abraham as Beth and Daryl proxies. I've pretty much gone over those. There was the bit in the church with Glenn and Enid where he says, or she asks him what he meant when he said, that's how you lose people even after they're gone. So I haven't put as much emphasis on this. And he gives a kind of a plausible explanation to Enid when he explains it to her. I mean, first of all, people were saying he didn't say Beth's name. He said Herschel and Dale, but he didn't say Beth, which was suspicious to us. But he basically says that it's about if you run away from them and if you don't stay true to yourself, then you are dishonoring them and what they died for, which, okay, is plausible. And there's truth in that, but it also feels like they came up with something convenient that he could say. But really, when he says, that's how you lose people even after they're gone, much like what Michonne said to Heath, I feel like this is something that he just recently went through, she was gone, which is a hint from the writers that she was not actually dead. But in the reality of the show, when Glenn says that, I think he means that she was dead. He believed her to be dead, and then he lost her again because they lost her body. Right? That's how you lose people even after they're gone. And probably something of what he said to Enid about not being who you are and running away, especially. Oh, I didn't say that part. Okay. Okay, let me let me finish what I'm saying. Something about, because he was talking about running away. He was getting after Enid for running away instead of staying to fight. And that's kind of very specifically what he was talking about when he says if you're not true to yourself and you just run away rather than dealing with it, then you are not being true to yourself and you're not honoring the people who died so that you could still be alive by running away, right? And that's how you lose people even after they're gone. So here's the other thing. Back when Rick was in the RV talking on the radio, I just forgot to go over this. And he's saying, if we ran back to Alexandria, that would be for us, staying out here to make sure this, goes well and we keep the walkers away. That's for them. I also wonder if during the missing 17 days, part of what went wrong is that, okay, so again, look at this visual. They are leading the walkers away, everything's going well. And then over here, the secondary group attacks those who are not participating, right? I'm wondering if part of what went wrong is that in that case, they did go running back to where the other group was. They abandoned their operation to lead walkers away and went back to help the people who were under attack, who were injured. Now, that wouldn't have been a bad thing. Like, we wouldn't be like, wow, what a bunch of idiots, like it's understandable. But because of that, maybe everything went way wrong. Maybe the walkers followed them back and maybe everything just kind of fell apart. And it's because they ran. And so, again, this is something that Rick's saying. It's like he has experience with this. If we go running back there, that'll be for us because we're freaked out and we need to stay the course and make sure this is good because he has experienced something where they did go running back and a disaster happened because of it. So I think that's part of it too. And then that makes sense why Glenn is mad at Enid for running away. And he's going, no, 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 no. We don't run away. This is not what we do. We're going to stay and fight. And if you don't, you're dishonoring people who have died. And this is how you lose people even after they're already gone. You see how it all kind of comes together and starts to make sense. So again, if there's anything I didn't go over and told you that I would, let me know. I do have one, okay, I'm going to talk about one more thing, and then there is going to have to be one more video that I'll do that'll be significantly shorter. It will probably only be a half-hour video. But let me just bring it back around to the beginning. So when they get to the end, they have to take a stand and fight for their home because despite their best efforts, a lot of walkers ended up around Alexandria. And even then, they were talking about leading them away. They were talking about, we can get a truck, we can get a car, we can do this and lead them away from the gates. You know, they were already talking about doing that anyway. But then the church fell, right? And realized too that the church fell. It had been burned. I've talked about that. Another example of something that was burned getting you in trouble. It fell, but it's also because of the wolves, right? So the wolves being a parallel to possibly the Grady Bunch during uh, season 5, the missing 17 days. And because they had slammed into the church with a truck, that's why it fell. And that let all of the walkers in. And I'm sure that is a mirror to something that happens in the missing 17 days. But again, I don't know what the details are. So then the walkers are all in, and this is where they have to fight for their home. And this is the first time we've seen them do this. In every other case, in every other place they've lived, once it becomes overrun with walkers, they flee, right? Here they said, no, we're not doing that. We are staying and fighting. And of course, it very much helped that Daryl was able to set the lake on fire because that took care of a lot of the walkers so that you know, they weren't fighting all of them. That probably got rid of half of them or more. And so anyway, they ended up just fighting for their home. And I really like the end of this arc. I think it's very powerful to see them all working together and fighting together. Unity is a big theme here, fighting together for the life you want, fighting for your happiness, fighting for your home, fighting for your safety, and they all did that. But I just feel like it's such a big deal. And in a way, it didn't land as hard as maybe it should have because we haven't seen the missing 17 days. And the opposite of what happened here probably happened during those missing 17 days, meaning they went through something very similar and they learned things, but overall, it did not go well and it was a major failure and they lost Beth's body because of it in the chaos of everything that was happening, right? And then we probably did get, you know, Daryl looking for her and all of that. But you can see too that suddenly 17 days before they get Noah home is making a lot more sense. There was a lot more going on here than even we have realized because they just haven't given us much about it, very little. And what a lot of what we've learned has been stuff that was leaked by the spoiler site and things that fans who are paying very, very close attention have pulled from social media that was then deleted, so we weren't really meant to see it. All of that, okay? So it's a fulfillment arc, what happens here, because they are finally overcoming the thing that they didn't overcome before. So let's see. I'm just reading from my notes here. It feels like a payoff because something happened before where this didn't happen, where they were not satisfied with the end. So in other words, they kind of failed. They were not proud of their actions and they didn't feel like they fought hard enough. This is a big theme that we see in this, a lot of them saying that we need to fight harder. I should have done this. I should have done that. They didn't feel like they deserved it. In fact, at one point, Tara says that when she and Rosita and Eugene are in the garage, so after the church falls and, you know, the streets are full of walkers and Tara, Rosita, and Eugene are in the garage together, you can see that Rosita is kind of falling into a depression, which is rare for her. And she says, is this it? Is this over? Is this place done? And Tara says, no, I don't think it's done. And then she says, but we have to be willing to fight for it. So maybe they're thinking they didn't fight hard enough before, you know, or something like that. And this feels like they're finally overcoming that. They're finally completing or fulfilling something that was left hanging before, and we just didn't see the first part of it. So this whole arc from episode 1 to episode 9 is a mirror of what happened during the missing 17 days. But it's a fulfillment where something different happens than what happened before. So in this case, let's put it this way. From what we theorize, number 1, they lost Beth. Number 2, I'm assuming the bad guys, this other group, whether it was Grady or someone else, kind of won and, you know, was left alive. They did not triumph over the Horde in any way, shape, or form. And they lost... this is where I talk about you could almost take it all the way back to the prison. I already kind of covered that. But this was the opposite of that. They took out the wolves. They did fight for their home. They were able to triumph over the Horde by getting rid of half of them and then taking out the second half eventually. And they were able to keep their home. So it's a fulfillment of something that happened before, but we didn't see it on the screen. Yeah, okay. So that's pretty much it. And like I said, let me know if there's anything I didn't cover that you want me to go into more detail about. There is going to be a 4th installment in the next few days. And basically what I'm going to show you there, it's not season 6. We had this almost exact same arc happen at the end of the Whisperer arc. But it's going to be a lot faster because in that case, it only lasted 2 episodes, whereas this was 9 episodes. So it's much quicker and much smaller. But we see something very, very similar. So I'll get into that and just to show more of the parallels there, and that if we've seen this more than once, it's important. Okay, so this was in season 6, which was a long time ago now. The Whisper arc was season 10, which was a few years ago now, but still much more recent, right? And they're still calling back to this, and they're still pointing to the missing 17 days. And if we're seeing the exact same template more than once, then clearly it's important. And clearly there's still stuff that they're going to show us eventually because they're still symbolizing it. And in that video, I will not only show you everything, but I will show you that there is something, it has to do, I did show it to you here, that has to do with that blonde walker who we said was a Beth Walker who's leading the horde. There is something about Beth leading a walker horde. And I don't know if that's literal or if it's more symbolic, but we've seen symbolism for it multiple times. So I'll talk about that. So I'm gonna shut up now. I know this video is long. In the next few days, I will get out the 4th installment of this series, which will show you the Tower arc with the Whisperers, and that will probably be the end. Okay. So if you're still here, thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I'll get the next one out as soon as I can.